Subject assessment. Family unit consisting of one father, age 71, retired investment banker, one brother, age 48, corporate attorney, one sister, age 45, nonprofit director, and subject herself, age 42, deputy director of operations, Central Intelligence Agency. Threat level: personal, not national. Duration of threat: 16 years and counting. Primary vulnerability. Subject's inability to disclose classified career progression has created information asymmetry that family exploits through systematic underestimation. Recommendation: maintain operational security, accept losses, move forward. But that's not how family works, is it? My name is Latoria Upton, and for 16 years I've been conducting the most exhausting operation of my career, pretending I don't notice when my own family treats me like I'm intellectually deficient. It started when I joined the agency at 26. Fresh out of graduate school with degrees in international relations and Arabic, recruited during a campus presentation that looked like a boring lecture on government careers, but was actually a sophisticated screening operation. They'd identified me 2 years earlier. They do that. Watch you, test you, wait to see if you'll notice. I noticed. But I couldn't tell my family that. The nature of intelligence work requires compartmentalization. So when Dad asked what I'd be doing at my new government job, I said something vague about analysis and research. When my brother Christopher pressed for details, I smiled and said it was classified. When my sister Anna Marie rolled her eyes and said, "Everything's classified when you don't want to admit you're just filing papers," I let it stand. Because correcting them would mean explaining things I couldn't explain, and not correcting them meant they filled in the blanks themselves. The blanks they filled in were not flattering. Over the years, as Christopher made partner at his law firm, and Anne-Marie built a respected nonprofit serving homeless youth, and I moved from analyst to operations officer to station chief to senior executive service, their assumptions about me calcified into certainty. In their minds, I was the family disappointment, the one who'd gone into government work because she couldn't hack it in the private sector, who stayed because the pension was decent and the demands were low, who couldn't discuss her work because there was nothing impressive to discuss. Family dinners became exercises in endurance. Christopher would talk about his cases, corporate mergers, intellectual property disputes, the kind of high-stakes negotiation that involved millions of dollars and teams of attorneys. Anna Marie would describe her nonprofit's expansion, the gala fundraising events, the celebrities who endorsed their mission. Dad would ask thoughtful questions, offer advice, beam with pride. Then they'd turn to me. "How's work, Latoria?" "Good." "Still doing the analysis thing?" "Something like that." "Must be nice having such a predictable schedule, government 9 to 5, right?" I'd spent the previous 3 months coordinating a counterterrorism operation across 4 countries, sleeping an average of 3 hours a night. Making decisions that meant the difference between stopping an attack and explaining casualties to grieving families. But sure, 9 to 5. Something like that, I'd repeat. The thing about being underestimated is that it grants you a certain freedom. When your family thinks you're simple, they stop guarding their words around you. They reveal things: petty jealousies, status anxieties, the careful calculations behind their apparent successes. I learned more about Christopher's crushing student debt and Anne-Marie's crumbling marriage from their unguarded conversations than they'd ever admit directly. But that freedom came with a cost. The cost was watching my father's face when he introduced his children to his friends. The way he'd brighten when describing Christopher's partnership, Anna Marie's nonprofit. The way his expression would go carefully neutral when he got to me. "And Latoria works for the government, some kind of research position." Some kind of research position. I was running intelligence operations in the Middle East. I'd survived 3 attempts on my life. I'd prevented attacks that would have killed hundreds. I'd briefed the president on matters of national security. And my father thought I did some kind of research position. Last month, Dad called to say he was updating his will. Could I come by Saturday? The lawyer would be there. It was time to finalize everything. I'd known what that meant, not just the will itself, but the message embedded in its distribution. The beach house in Cape Cod, the one we'd spent summers at as children, worth about $2 million now. The investment accounts, carefully managed over decades, worth considerably more. The house he lived in, the antiques, the whole accumulated wealth of a successful life. I'd known I wouldn't get an equal share. I'd made peace with that. But peace is different from preparation, and I wasn't prepared for the specific architecture of his dismissal. Saturday arrived cold and bright. I drove to Dad's house. Not the childhood home, which he'd sold years ago, but the sleek modern townhouse he'd bought after Mom died. The kind of place that says, I've moved on, and I've still got it, in equal measure. Christopher's BMW was already in the driveway, Anne-Marie's Lexus beside it. I parked my 5-year-old Honda on the street and walked up the path. Dad answered the door himself. Latoria, good, everyone's here. We're in the sunroom. The sunroom was at the back of the house, glass walls on 3 sides, filled with the houseplants Dad had taken up cultivating in retirement. A simple pine table held stacks of documents. Christopher sat on one side, Anne-Marie on the other. A woman in her 60s, the lawyer presumably, sat at the head of the table with a laptop open. Have a seat, Dad said, gesturing to the remaining chair. I sat. The lawyer introduced herself as Patricia Jarman, estate attorney. She'd been working with Dad for several months to structure his estate in a way that minimized tax burden while ensuring clear distribution. It was all very straightforward. She'd walk us through the major assets and their designated beneficiaries. Any questions could be addressed at the end. She pulled up a document on her laptop and began reading. The beach house went to Christopher. Given your family's use of the property and your expressed interest in maintaining it for future generations. The investment accounts, 3 of them, totaling just over $4 million, went to Anne-Marie. In recognition of your nonprofit work and to provide you with financial security as you continue your important mission. Various smaller items, the art collection, the antique furniture, the vintage car Dad had restored, were divided between Christopher and Anne-Marie based on expressed preferences. Then Patricia got to me. For Latoria, a cash bequest of $5,000. The sunroom went very still. Light filtered through the glass walls, illuminating dust motes floating in the air. One of Dad's orchids had dropped a petal onto the table. 5,000, I said. My voice sounded distant, clinical. Yes, Dad leaned forward. Latoria, I know that seems small compared to what your brother and sister are getting. But the thing is, they've established themselves. They've built careers that require capital, that benefit from inheritance. You've got your government pension coming, you're set. This money needs to go where it can make a difference. Where it can make a difference, I repeated. Exactly. Christopher's kids, college funds, Anne-Marie's nonprofit expansion, strategic allocation of resources, you understand. I understood. I understood perfectly. Christopher shifted uncomfortably. Dad, maybe we should discuss. It's fine, I said. The ice in my voice could have frozen the room. I understand the logic. Dad relaxed. I knew you would. You've always been practical. Not everyone needs a big inheritance. Some people are happy with simpler lives. Simpler lives? Patricia cleared her throat. If there are no objections, I'll need everyone to acknowledge that they've been informed of the distribution. This isn't a requirement for the will itself, but it helps avoid surprises later. I have a question, I said. Dad's expression said he'd been expecting this. The slightly impatient look of someone dealing with a child who doesn't understand adult matters. Of course. Though I should warn you, Patricia has assured me the structure is sound. You can't contest it. I don't want to contest it, I just want to clarify something. The $5,000. Is that because you genuinely believe that's proportional to my financial need, or because you've decided my life has less value than theirs? Quote, the question landed like a grenade without the explosion. Latoria, Dad's voice had that warning tone, don't be dramatic. This is about practical resource allocation. I'm asking a practical question. Do you think I earn less than Christopher, have fewer assets than Anne-Marie? Live a smaller life? I think you've made choices that lead to different outcomes. Your brother worked his way through law school, made partner at a prestigious firm. Your sister built an organization from nothing. You chose a government job, a steady paycheck, security. There's no shame in that. No shame, I said. Just $5,000 worth of value. Anne-Marie spoke up, her voice careful. Tori, I think what Dad's trying to say. Don't. I held up a hand. Don't translate for him. He's been very clear. Patricia looked between us, professional mask slipping slightly. Perhaps we should take a break. Dad's phone buzzed, not a regular buzz. The specific, insistent vibration of a secure government phone, the kind that doesn't stop until you answer it. He glanced at the screen, frowned. I need to take this. He stood and walked toward the door, answering. This is not a good time. I could hear the voice on the other end. Female, professional, urgent. Could hear Dad's responses getting shorter, more confused. She's busy right now. I'm in the middle of a family meeting. Can this wait? The voice on the other end said something sharp. Dad stopped walking. His face drained of color. I see. Yes, of course. Yes, right away. He turned back to the sunroom, looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before, confusion fighting with something that might have been fear. The deputy director will call you back, he said slowly. They said this is very important. Something about an embassy in Ankara. He stared at me. I stared back. They called you, deputy director, he said. Yes. Of what? Operations, Central Intelligence Agency. The orchid petal on the table trembled in a breeze from the open window. Christopher had gone completely rigid. Anne-Marie's mouth was open. You're Dad couldn't finish the sentence. Deputy Director of Operations. I oversee all covert operations globally. I have about 2,000 case officers under my command. My annual budget is classified, but it exceeds the GDP of several small nations. The call just now was probably about the hostage situation in Turkey. 3 American contractors. I've been coordinating the extraction for 6 days. I need to call back in the next 10 minutes, or people might die. Patricia's laptop made a small ding, breaking the silence. You're deputy director, Christopher said. How long? 18 months. Before that? Station chief in Kabul. Before that, deputy station chief in Baghdad. Before that, operations officer in 6 different countries. Before that, analyst. I've been with the agency for 16 years. I started at GS9. I'm now at SES4. Do you need me to explain what any of that means? Why didn't you tell us? Anne-Marie's voice was small. Because the nature of my work requires compartmentalization. Because explaining would mean revealing things I'm not authorized to reveal. Because you filled in the blanks yourselves and I let you. You let us think. Dad stopped. Started again. We thought you were some kind of administrative assistant. I know what you thought. And you just let us? What was I supposed to do? Show up to dinner and announce I just prevented a terrorist attack? Explain that I can't make Thanksgiving because I'm coordinating intelligence sharing agreements with foreign governments? Correct you every time you assumed my job was boring? My phone vibrated, the secure one in my bag. Time was up. I stood. I need to take this call. Patricia, thank you for your time. Dad, Christopher, Anne-Marie, I accept the terms of the will. $5,000 is generous. I'll use it wisely. The ice in my voice could have cracked steel. Tori, wait. Dad reached for my arm. Don't. I stepped back. I have 3 Americans in a basement in Ankara who need me to coordinate with Turkish Intelligence and Special Activities Division before their captors move them to a secondary location. I don't have time for this conversation. I walked out of the sunroom, through the house, to my car. Behind me, I could hear raised voices. Dad's confusion, Christopher's protests, Anne-Marie saying something about, how were we supposed to know? I sat in my car and answered the phone. Upton. Ma'am, we have movement on the hostages. Turkish police report. I listened, gave orders, coordinated assets, made decisions that involved human lives and international relations and consequences that would ripple for years. I did it from the front seat of my Honda Civic while my family stood in the sunroom trying to reconcile the daughter they'd underestimated with the reality of who I'd always been. The extraction went well. All 3 contractors recovered safely. Turkish government issued a statement thanking American intelligence for cooperation. My team performed flawlessly. I didn't go back inside. Over the next week, my phone filled with messages. Dad wanted to talk. Christopher wanted to explain. Anne-Marie wanted to understand. Patricia wanted to revise the will. I responded to exactly one message, Patricia's. I told her the will was fine as structured. No changes needed. Because here's what I'd learned in 16 years of intelligence work. Some things can't be fixed. Some damage is permanent. Some relationships, once broken, stay broken, not because people refused to repair them, but because the foundation was never real to begin with. My family loved a version of me that didn't exist. They'd built an entire architecture of assumptions around someone they'd never actually tried to know. And when forced to confront the real person, their first reaction wasn't remorse. It was confusion about why I'd hidden from them, as if my secrecy was the problem rather than their willful blindness. I could have forgiven the will. I could have forgiven the $5,000. Money is just money. But I couldn't forgive the casual certainty in my father's voice when he'd said, "You've always been practical, and not everyone needs a big inheritance and simpler lives." The absolute conviction that he knew who I was, what I needed, what I deserved. He'd divided his estate based on that certainty. And when confronted with evidence that his certainty was delusion, his primary emotion was embarrassment, not guilt. 2 months later, I stood in the Oval Office briefing the president on emerging threats in Central Asia. I coordinated with the Director of National Intelligence on personnel assignments. I approved operations that involved hundreds of people and millions of dollars and consequences that would shape international relations for years. And I did it all while knowing that in my father's will, my life's work was valued at $5,000. The call from Patricia came on a Wednesday. Dad wanted to revise the will, equal distribution among all 3 children. He'd realized he'd made a mistake. I told her no. No? She sounded surprised. Ms. Upton, we're talking about approximately $2 million. That's your share of the adjusted distribution. I understand the math. My answer is no. Can I ask why? Because changing the will now means my value changed when my title was revealed. It means I'm worth more because I'm a deputy director, not because I'm his daughter. And I'd rather have $5,000 and my self-respect than $2 million, and the knowledge that my father only valued me once he understood my rank. Patricia was quiet for a moment. That's very principled. That's very sad, I corrected, but it's honest. I saw my family once more after that, at a restaurant, Dad's birthday, the kind of obligation you can't decline without creating drama. We were polite, careful. We talked about weather and traffic and safe topics. No one mentioned the will, no one mentioned Turkey. No one mentioned the 16 years I'd spent building a career they'd never bothered to understand. Christopher picked up the check. I let him. As I drove home that night, I thought about all the operations I'd run, all the assets I'd managed, all the decisions I'd made that involved life and death and national security. I thought about the commendations in my personnel file, the briefings with presidents and cabinet members, the operations that would never be declassified but had changed the world in small and visible ways. And I thought about my father's sunroom, the afternoon light, the orchid petal on the table, and the number 5,000. Some victories come with medals and recognition. Others come with the quiet knowledge that you were right to trust your own judgment over someone else's assumptions. I'd built a life that mattered, a career that made a difference, a reputation that opened doors and commanded respect from people who actually knew me. And I'd done it all while my family thought I filed papers. Maybe that was enough, maybe it had to be. The highway stretched ahead, empty and dark. My secure phone sat silent in the passenger seat. Tomorrow, I'd brief the National Security Council on emerging threats. Next week, I'd travel to Brussels for intelligence sharing meetings. Next month, another crisis, another operation, another set of decisions that would matter to people I'd never meet. I'd do it all knowing that the people who were supposed to know me best had needed a phone call from Langley to see me clearly. And I'd do it anyway. Because that's what the work requires, and the work is what matters. Even if my family would never understand that. Even if the understanding came too late.